This is the Samsung Odyssey Neo G9 57-inch mini LED gaming monitor, and I think it may be the closest thing to my endgame monitor that I've ever come across. So I'm just going to start this off by reading a couple of specs out to you guys. 57-inch diagonal screen length, 7680 by 2160 dual UHD resolution, quantum mini LED backlight, VESA display HDR 1000 certified, 240Hz refresh rate. So in other words, pretty much everything you could ever ask for in a gaming monitor. Now, I do want to preface this by saying that I don't actually use a lot of those features in my day-to-day use. For me, first and foremost, this is a productivity monitor, and in this video, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on that side. If you want to hear about all the gaming performance with the motion blur tested, latency, brightness levels, that kind of stuff, there are plenty of other videos out there on that, and I think it'd be pretty unproductive for me to just regurgitate all those same numbers back at you. So with that out of the way, I've been using this monitor for the past couple of weeks and I am ready to share that experience with you guys. Now, first off, you guys might be wondering why on earth I would spend this amount of money on such a high performing gaming monitor if all I'm going to be doing is productivity tasks on it. And the short answer is, if you want this form factor, there just simply isn't any other option on the market right now. For me and my workflow, and I'm assuming for a lot of you guys as well, the 32:9 aspect ratio is my favorite form factor for a monitor because it gives you all the functionality of having dual monitors while having the flexibility to also become one big, really wide screen for an immersive experience. And until now, the largest screen that you could get with that 32:9 aspect ratio was 49 inches, giving you the equivalent of having two 27-inch monitors side by side. And I think for most people in most situations, that's going to be more than enough. But for me, I always just found myself wanting a little extra screen real estate because as a single 16:9 screen size, I always felt like 32 inches was the perfect sweet spot in terms of not being so big it's overwhelming, but being big enough I feel like I have all the room I want for all of my activities. And now with the 57-inch Odyssey, you do get that equivalent of having two 32-inch monitors side by side with no bezel in between. Now you may be asking yourself, are those extra couple of inches really that big of a deal? Like, is there anything that you can do on this monitor that you couldn't do on the 49-inch version? And the short answer is, well, no, not really. There's not really anything you can do on this 57-inch monitor that you couldn't do on the 49-inch version. The difference, at least for me, was just the comfort in using it. Having a bigger screen basically allows you to sit a little bit farther away from the monitor than you otherwise would without sacrificing how much area in your field of view it takes up. And even though it might be just a couple of extra inches, it is definitely noticeable. However, that also does mean that you are going to get a lot of the same issues that you got on that 49-inch version. Like if you regularly need to share your screen with people for work or really anything, it's going to be a pretty bad experience for them unless they also have a 32:9 screen, which is basically nobody. And in fact, I remember the first 49-inch monitor I bought was used, and the reason the guy was selling it was because he needed to share a screen a lot for work and it just really wasn't working out. Also, some games just won't work with this screen size, and even if they do, they won't give you the most ideal experience. But what I found especially annoying though was that a lot of cinematic movies are shot in ultra wide, like 21:9 or even wider sometimes, and they should in theory be a great experience on an ultra wide monitor like this, but a lot of the times they just end up taking the center sliver of the screen with black bars on all sides, which just doesn't make any sense to me. But those instances are pretty few and far between, which is why I think those trade-offs are worth it and why I continue to use this form factor. Also new with this monitor, it has a resolution of 7680 by 2160, which is basically just two 4K displays slapped together. And it can do that at 240 Hz. And right now it's actually really hard to find any computer or graphics card that will even support those resolutions at that frame rate. Like the computer I have right now is the M1 Max MacBook Pro, which is not even that old. It's like a year or two old at this point, and it just doesn't support that resolution like at all. So I haven't actually even seen this monitor in its full glory yet. I run this at 5120 by 1440 at 60 Hertz. But the thing is, I still love it. And I know a lot of you guys will be thinking that I am totally wasting the potential of this monitor. And to a certain extent, yes, I am. And even though right now I can't take full advantage of all the features in the monitor, it's good to know that in the future, if I ever upgrade computers, I'm kind of future-proofed on the monitor front. What I can appreciate on this monitor right now though is the mini LED backlight, which I actually prefer over OLED because you get very similar levels of contrast with better brightness and no risk of burn-in. Now I will say that in terms of sheer image quality, OLED definitely still is better and you will notice a difference, but this one I find to be more than good enough for pretty much any situation, and compared to older LCD models I've tried, this one is just leaps and bounds ahead. Like I used to use the older CRG9, which is Samsung's lower end Odyssey model, and I felt that anytime I was doing anything color critical like photo editing or video editing, I just couldn't trust what I saw on the screen, which is definitely not the case with this one. I do have two complaints about the screen though, and that would be one, the matte finish. It just totally ruins perceived contrast and sharpness, and I feel like if they used a glossy finish, it would just look like 100 times better. And two, the viewing angles are just not that good. Like even moving your head side to side, like maybe a foot to either direction, you're gonna notice significant shifts in color and contrast. Something that I will admit OLED handles a lot better. Something that definitely does help mitigate that though is that 1000R curve. And if you're not familiar with what that means, basically the curve on this monitor is the same as a curve on a circle with a radius of 1 meter or 1000 millimeters. And just for reference, most curved monitors have a radius of about 1800R, so this being at 1000R is much more curved. And for a monitor this wide, that curve is actually really appreciated, because usually with a screen of this size, the edges of the display are going to be significantly farther than the middle, and that 1000R curve really helps bring those edges forward and closer to your eyes so that all parts of the screen are relatively equidistant from your eye. It helps a lot with those off-axis color shift issues, but it also helps make this monitor feel a lot more immersive. Like it's kind of hard to describe, but when using this monitor, it feels like I'm almost inside of the monitor rather than sitting in front of it. It did take me a little bit to get used to how intense that curve was though, because it made straight lines not look straight sometimes, and it was really difficult to get a level horizon when editing photos or video. But once I used it for like 2 days, it felt perfectly natural. The other thing though is that since the curve on this is so intense and the screen is so large, this monitor is just a lot deeper than it otherwise would be, which can make setting it up on your desk a bit of a challenge. Like I had to push my speakers a lot further forward than I normally would, which means I lose some usable desk space. And if you're like me and really enjoy having a monitor light bar, then you're gonna have to get one that's also curved, because a straight one is just gonna overlap with the edges of the monitor. And if you wanna use this monitor, you better have a huge desk. Like the one I'm using is 80 inches wide by 35 inches deep, which is already bigger than normal, but it feels just right for this monitor. And I would say that if you have anything under 72 inches wide, just don't get it. And lastly, just a couple of nitpicks. First, even though this is a gaming monitor first, I wish it didn't have to look so gamery. Like recently, I've been trying to get away from that whole gamer aesthetic with RGB and everything, and going for something more, for a lack of a better term, grown up, and the design of this monitor just doesn't really play very well to that. And I'm not even just talking about the back of the monitor, because most people, including myself, are just going to push this up against a wall, but the gamery design even extends to the front. Like it has these two pieces on the edges that stick out that I just don't understand why they're there, and makes it so that I can't sit it flat on my desk shelf. And their infinity core lighting kind of sucks because it's way too dim to be a backlight if you have it pushed up against a wall like I think most people will, so I stuck my own lights back on there. But those are very minor complaints, and overall I still love this monitor. Like when I first started using the 49-inch ultrawide form factor, I just fell in love with it because it was so good for multitasking. And this basically takes everything that was great about that form factor and just kicks it up to 11. So I think if you've used a 32:9 monitor before and you like it and you can afford to upgrade to this one and you have the space for it, then I say go for it, because this monitor is sick. Anyways, that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, or at least found it a little bit useful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.